worry about that. There is one area where there is no getting away from, and that is the relationship between a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law. I want to talk about this in particular because there is this constant feeling that women are the worst enemies of women. I'll say that again, that women are, right? There could be some truth to it, because I don't mind if a male colleague rises faster than I do, but if my female colleague rises faster than I do, maybe something disturbs me, maybe. But here I'm talking about the house, within the home. And when I'm talking about the home, I'm really disturbed by this idea that as a mother-in-law, I want my daughter-in-law to think of this house as hers. Wonderful, because she's going to be here for the rest of her life. But at the same time, I keep reminding her, "Ato tari pyarnati, yaad rakhsho. Sasre ma choto," right? When you keep saying that to her on one side, and on the other side you say that you want her to think of this as her home, I think somewhere I, as a mother-in-law, am terribly confused, right? I don't know what I want her to do. Do I want her to think of this as a home, or do I not want her to think of this as a home? I think this is a question that we have to ask ourselves. All women have to ask ourselves. But an interesting offshoot of this is, I understand when girls have gone to live with their parents after marriage, the father treats his son-in-law exactly as our mothers-in-law would treat their daughters-in-law. Does that make sense? Right? So if you go as a daughter, if you go to live with your parents after marriage, your father treats your husband, that is his son-in-law, exactly the same way as mothers-in-law generally are. So there is something about that relationship, right? Okay, anyway, I'm not talking about that part of it. So I think we need to make that extra effort, whether we are in the role of a daughter-in-law or whether we are in the role of a mother-in-law. Because I think that mutual adjustment, because I'm talking about where are we today? Where are we today? We are still in a country, in a society where I, who probably light the lamp every morning, have no qualms about lighting my daughter-in-law, right? Where I have no qualms. I don't mind getting the kerosene. I don't mind throwing the kerosene on her or whatever, or look for other ways of doing that. So I think somewhere we have to ask ourselves, is this what we talk about when we talk about women having come a long way from where I began, 1947? I think we have to ask ourselves this. I'm saying this again and again, that we have to ask ourselves, because all of us know that no law can help us, right? A law can be there as a guideline. A law, you can go knocking at the court, at the doors of a court or a police station, probably. But you can't do it every day. If the change has to come, then obviously it has to come from us. And that is why I'm constantly talking about what we need to do, what we need to think about. You might say, so what is new about it all? So I would like to leave you with, what do we do now? Where do we go from here? What is the next plan if we really want to see women probably on par with men at some stage? Where do we go? I think the first step would begin with what I would like to call women bonding. Bonding becomes very important because bonding between peers, the peer understanding that can come along, the fact that you can understand the situation in which the other person is, more likely to happen if you have shared experiences. So when I talk about this women bonding, it could be between me and my maid servant, Maybe I could understand what she is going through much better than maybe her son can. Maybe I'm saying, right? So this woman bonding that I'm talking about is not necessarily women bonding equal, at the equal strata, or being equal to each other, not necessarily with the same education, with the same class background, economic background, caste background. That might not be important. What would be important is that the bonding takes place, right, because they are women. So if that could happen, and if that could happen in a big way, yes, maybe it is happening, but maybe much more. It should happen. The range should increase. So I think that is one place where we should begin. Since I've been a teacher for over 4 decades, I personally feel that teachers have a major role to play. A major role to play not by talking, not by lecturing, not by having precepts every day in the class, not by that, but by their behavior maybe, by probably drawing attention to stories maybe, instances maybe, characters maybe, personalities maybe. Because we are, and particularly if we are school teachers, I think we have a greater advantage because our students listen more to us. But of course, even at the college level, if you are a popular, respected teacher, a lot of ideas can get across. So I think as teachers, we can play a major, major role in bringing about some transformation in the right direction, in the direction in which we think we should be moving, in the direction in which we think we would like to see our girls, our women moving. So maybe teachers have a big role to play. I would think that mothers have a role to play. But mothers who have only daughters or mothers who have only sons, to my mind, have a smaller role to play in bringing about this change. I know it's an age now where most of us have probably one child. But I'm talking about people who have both a son and a daughter. I think they have a greater role to play. Let me say that a little more in detail. If from the moment my daughter and son are in their teens or even younger, if I'm constantly making a distinction between the two of them, why I'm saying this, I have daughters, so I'm always able to see it from a daughter's point of view. She has sons, so she's always able to see it from a son's point of view. So if you have only children of one sex, maybe you cannot play as big a role, I believe, as if you have children of both the sexes. So if you have a son and a daughter, I think you can contribute tremendously to this change that we hope to see in society. How do we do that? By ensuring that our girl child, our daughters, feel that they are equal to our sons, feel that they are not inferior, feel that they don't have to prove themselves, feel that they don't belong to this family, because later on, we don't know whether they're going to belong to that family or not. If we can do this, I believe that we could probably contribute to the change that we are hoping to see. As a society, and this is where I will have to talk about what all of us need to do together. As a society, what is it that we can do? I think all that needs to be stressed upon, all that needs to be emphasized is the fact that we are different, obviously, but we are not constantly fighting a battle about who is superior and who is inferior. If, as a society, it's not as if this is only an Indian problem, right? This problem is there all over the world, probably in smaller or greater measure. Probably not among the majority, but among the minority, maybe, but it's there all over the world. So I'm not talking, because we know that in China, right, one child, so everybody wants to have a male child. So I'm not talking about that. But what I'm talking about is as a society, if we can see that we are not in constant battle, and I can understand how this is getting worse and worse with each passing day, because it looks as what were earlier considered to be purely male domains, whether it is education, whether it's work, professional, whether it is what you are capable of doing. In every area, when you see more and more of the other sex coming in, I guess the problems get they don't get minimized, they're only getting increased. They're in a sense, they're getting exaggerated. As we see more and more women, we could look at, say, an engineering college, for example, where 20, 30 years ago, we had probably 5% girl students. And today we probably have 50%, if not 60%, right? So we've got 50% girl students. So there is as if you are encroaching upon my, right? So we would need, as a society, we will have to see, we will have to admit, we will have to accept. In fact, we will have to appreciate the fact that we are different, but we are not in conflict. And you cannot have any kind of development, any kind of progress of the society in which we live, the country we live in, the family we live in, unless everybody progresses. I think this is saying something which is so simplistic, but I think which is most difficult, probably, to put into action. I would like to conclude by saying, please remember what you want to tell your sons, as much as you remember what you want to tell your daughters. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak. It's been a great pleasure, and I think we have questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. It was so enlightening and thought-provoking. And with the same ease, you have been able to actually kind of really struck a chord of a lot of things that we go through every day, actually. So, audience, we have around 5 minutes for question answer. Any question that you want to ask. So.
To look at one more addition to your set of solutions for the women of today to find their place under the sun, their deserving place, is actually a story of a man, a school dropout from Coimbatore called Muruganathan. And he is known the world over as the sanitary napkin man. And what struck, why that story out here in today's session, you talked about the woman having to make the sacrifice at home. The girl being given less food so that the son may be given more nutrition and all that. Muruganathan's story began when he saw his wife sacrificing expenses of her own because she didn't want to buy the costly branded sanitary napkins. And when he probed, because he was absolutely unaware about these aspects, being brought up in that conservative, typical lower middle class kind of a strata. And then his response to this particular instance leads me to believe that there is a fifth solution, if I may use the term, to add on to your four, ma'am. If we can celebrate stories such as these, not his having come up with cost-effective machines
sir,
for this.
we will need to pass on the mic because
I'm sorry.
we have a lot of people asking. Thank you so much. Could you please pass on the mic? Thank you so much for sharing.
Hello, Dr. Indira. My question comes from the fact that you touched upon the upbringing of the girls, the education, their conduct in the workplace, and particularly with reference to the benchmark date that you set yourself, that is 1947. My question is, or I was in fact wondering whether you gave this a thought, and that is about the troubled marriages and the incidence of troubled marriages now in comparison to, of course, 1947. The incidence is increasing. The incidence is increasing particularly amongst, and it is pronounced
So,
particularly
sir,
among the
sir,
young women.
Yes, sir. Yes,
So do
sir.
you have a thought about that?
Sure.
Shall I take each question as it comes? Yeah, I think
yes,
that'll be
sir.
better.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fine. Yes, but what I wanted to focus on today is not areas where we would necessarily have to talk about the male contribution to that or the female contribution. And I knew I would be treading on very dangerous ground. Why are divorces increasing today? Because the first answer that would come from most people, males, I'm sorry, is because girls have stopped adjusting. So I didn't want to go into any of those issues, and that is why I didn't talk about divorces. I know it's a major issue, and we have to look at it, but I didn't take it into my focus today.
Very, very true. We'll come back to you. There's a question here. Ma'am, you wanted to ask something?
Mike,
I'll talk little bit in Gujarati also.
welcome.
Yeah.
Ma'am, my
આપણે-
humble request is only to keep it to the question, please.
Yeah.
Just the question.
As you said, economic independence for a woman is necessary, but generally people advocate like that. But if a daughter-in-law in